Hello. Welcome to episode 18 of 49th Parahell, a Canadian podcast where we explore the hellish nightmare world of modern reality together. Rob Rousseau here. Thank you for joining me once again. I'm happy to have you here. Welcome. Welcome to 49th Parahell Studios, my basement. You're not actually in my basement, you're listening to me, so we're off to a great start here so far. But yes, we're back here, and if you listened to last week's episode with Ishmael and Darrow, I was really happy with how that one came out. I thought it was a really timely conversation with Ishmael about right-wing media and conspiracy theories. I mean, when I actually spoke to Ishmael, it was just as the story about the MAGA bomber mailing pipe bombs to Democratic officials was breaking. And when I recorded the intro and the outro, it was after we had kind of found out about the motivations of the bomber, who he was, the fact that he was really a Donald Trump fanboy. And the next day, as soon as I released the episode, of course, there was this horrific synagogue shooting in Pittsburgh, where 11 people were murdered at a synagogue in the Squirrel Hill neighborhood of Pittsburgh, which was really, really horrendous. And it turned out that the synagogue shooter was also incredibly immersed in these right-wing conspiracy theories. He wasn't quite a MAGA guy to the same extent, because his hatred of the Jews was so severe that he actually thought Donald Trump was not racist enough. But he was immersed in the same sort of right-wing conspiracy theories that are being propagated on conservative media and are being spread by the president himself. He was obsessed with this migrant caravan story, which I spoke to Ishmael about. And the reason he was attacking this Jewish synagogue was because of his anger at the Jewish community there for their involvement in resettling refugees. Particularly, he specifically name-dropped a nonprofit organization, HIAS, which has been resettling refugees in America for a very long time now. And as I mentioned, he was obsessed with this migrant caravan that's being talked about nonstop on conservative media. And there's been kind of an anti-Semitic slant to the whole caravan story where George Soros is being accused of funding this caravan somehow as part of this kind of insidious plot to resettle refugees and destroy the white race in America. And this is an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory that's been around for a really, really long time. And again, it was related to everything that I was talking about on the show last week. We were talking about how these right-wing conspiracy theories are becoming more and more unhinged and inspiring more and more deranged people to act on their kind of violent fantasies. And then this happened. And in the wake of this shooting, I guess I don't know what I was thinking, but I guess I thought for a few moments that maybe Donald Trump or maybe the Republican Party would, think about pumping the brakes on this whole conspiracy theory and their whole rhetorical framing about, violent Democrats and violent leftists. But of course, Donald Trump the next day just doubled right down on this conspiracy theory. He's still talking about the migrant caravan. He's talking about sending troops to the United States border. And has apparently given them the go-ahead to just start firing on people if they start throwing rocks or anything like that. So I'm not sure what I was thinking in terms of them maybe having some self-reflection. I think one thing I've learned about conservatives in the Trump era is that there's no bar low enough that they won't slither right under it, and that's exactly what they did. So it was very scary and very upsetting, and this is kind of the situation heading into the midterm elections on Tuesday. The Donald Trump and the Republican Party, their whole electoral strategy has been to talk about this migrant caravan and these kind of right-wing conspiracy theories. And I guess we're going to see on Tuesday what kind of an impact, if any, that's going to have on the actual election results. And on that note, we have a really, really exciting, big episode coming up here. And I've got Hasan Piker from the Young Turks coming on the program to help me break down this midterm election. And just to be perfectly frank, we only ended up talking about the actual election for about 5 or 10 minutes, but we did have a really interesting talk about the looming spectre of American fascism and the kind of deeply cynical, racist rhetoric that Donald Trump's been relying on from day one, from the first day he announced his campaign all the way up to now. And we had a really interesting discussion. I was really happy that he was able to come on. And since we had quite a long talk, why don't we just bring Hasan on the show right now? You definitely don't want to miss this one. It was really great. So Hasan Piker will be coming on the show right after this Soviet synth pop. Yeah, thanks so much for doing it, man, for moving your stuff around. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
No problem, man. As a matter of fact, it still worked out. I still got to work out, got jacked before I came on your podcast, and so I'm happy.
You got your pump in?
I got my pump in. I got my lift in. Just getting my body ready for an authoritarian regime that is looming over. It's the spectre that is haunting the United States, and it's not the communism spectre. It's the fascism spectre.
Yeah. No, I was saying to another friend today, like I'm really not in good enough shape to do a revolution right now. I gotta start hitting the gym too, and maybe shed a few pounds so I'm ready for when shit starts popping off.
Yeah. Or at the very least, I just like to keep my body ready, keep my mind ready, so that if I were to force to live off the land or whatever, off the grid somehow, I'd be able to do that. Hopefully.
Yeah, and hey, it's serving a couple of purposes for you, because it helps with the thirst traps as well, which bring in more people that you can then radicalize too. So
absolutely, big one, for sure.
It's kind of a number of fronts that's working for you.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Hasan Piker, thank you so much again for joining the show, 49th Parahell. How are you doing? How's it going down there?
It's going great in Los Angeles in general. Like, the weather is nice and whatever, but I feel like the creeping authoritarianism, especially from an immigrant's perspective, especially from a Muslim immigrant's perspective, is getting worse and worse for people like myself in America, because I'm genuinely living with the fear that my citizenship status, even though I was born here, might potentially get revoked at some point. You know what I mean? So,
yeah. And well, hey, it's not like, Turkish journalists are just getting murdered, or journalists in Turkey being disappeared.
The alternative isn't much better either, because, my father or my family was of the previous socioeconomic elite in Turkey before Erdogan rose to power. And, so we were kind of ousted. Our Western Kemalist perspective is now frowned upon. They look at us as we are, the elitist intellectuals who have been ousted from positions of power in Turkish government. So there's a lot of disdain there too. And obviously, as everyone knows, Turkey is notorious for its treatment of the free press, or whatever is considered the free press at this point. So, I have nowhere to go, basically.
Yeah, well, you can come here.
Yeah,
come stay in my basement.
Yeah, I'm toying around with that idea. If if everything goes to hell, I could just live in Canada or something illegally across the border and live there.
I'll help you out. You can go in my trunk or whatever.
Yeah.
We'll figure something out. But I think that's a good place to start, though, because I wanted to bring you on as kind of a midterms preview, even though we're not really big numbers guys, but to talk about that. But why don't we just start there? I was only kind of introduced to your work pretty recently. Can you just tell me how'd you end up in the situation where you are now? You've kind of got this big following. You're with the Young Turks, kind of an up and coming progressive media dude. How did you end up in this position?
So, I was always very political, I think, because I grew up in Turkey, and Turkish people are inherently very political. How in Western nations there's this this meme almost where people are like, oh yeah, you shouldn't talk about politics or religion. Those are the two things that we absolutely talk about in Turkey. So I was always very political. And then I saw an authoritarian, right-wing, very religious populist seize power over Turkish politics when I was like 15, 16 years old. And even earlier than that, actually, when I was even younger than that. And that always, and I saw the consequences of that firsthand and how it affected my life, which is when I decided, like, I'm not only interested in politics, but I want to make sure that there are changes. I was too young when I was in Turkey. So then when I came to America, I studied political science, and now, I was covering it already. I interned at the Young Turks, and I always wanted to do like a show on the side there. I always had this idea of like kind of doing a more left-leaning, maybe like socialist Jon Stewart style show with less satire, but more more commentary, more directed at like electoral politics as well as like systemic disenfranchisement or whatever. So I started building out a show at TYT on the side, even though I was originally brought on board after my internship as like a salesperson, basically the first ever salesperson that they had. I was doing direct sales for the network, and the show took off. Even though I built it out of like a supply closet, essentially, it took off, and here we're here.
Great. Well, it's been I think it's pretty incredible what you've been able to build, and it's been fun seeing you lately debating the likes of Charlie Kirk, friend of the show, and Ann Coulter recently. Also
a friend of the show, I'm assuming.
Not her, not Ann. Sorry, I gotta have some standards. No, I've been really enjoying that, and seeing Charlie Kirk, especially the kind of like one of facts don't care about your feelings is more of like a Ben Shapiro thing, but Charlie Kirk is very much of that kind of like ilk. And
they love throwing that around.
Yeah, and seeing him just completely lose his mind and start, puffing up his chest and going after Cenk in the audience of Politicon there was pretty great to watch for me.
Yeah, for a question that he presented to me, it was the same question. He could have easily avoided it. I didn't even hear Cenk say it originally. And like I said, he absolutely could have avoided answering it or avoided like even paying attention to Cenk, but he was so frazzled at that point from like being slapped around verbally up and down the entire debate. Like, I mean, he completely lost his mind and started freaking out over the crowd. But the weird thing about Republicans is that they don't really care, man. Like that whole like facts over feelings bullshit. Can I curse on this show, by the way?
Please curse away. Yeah.
Okay. That facts over feelings bullshit is absolutely just for like, middle ground, like moderate Republicans, or I guess moderate Democrats, which I would regard as like conservatives, it's to win them over so that like every now and then you'll have a celebrity that has an HBO show or whatever tweet out something like, I really enjoy Ben Shapiro's commentary. Like, I don't agree with him, but you guys should all listen to him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's exclusively serves that purpose, even though what Ben Shapiro is saying is no different than what like, especially his past writings aren't that much different than what you would hear from a white nationalist. It's just a new coat of polish on it, and it sounds a lot more polite.
Yeah, no, that's I think that's true. And then when you get into like sort of the Republican campaign, I mean, for as much as like the right tries to frame Democrats and liberals as being guided by these kind of emotions or being hysterical, I mean, when you look at what the Republican 2018 midterm campaign is about is entirely feelings. Like they've been in charge of like all levers of power in America for 2 years now. Their actual like legislative agenda is deeply unpopular with like a huge part of the country. So what they've made this whole midterm about is a migrant caravan and, these 5,000 poor Hondurans are coming to like, murder you. And, people were too mean to Brett Kavanaugh. And that's their whole campaign. And oddly enough, I think like that probably has more of a chance to work with Republican voters than if they were actually to campaign on what the facts of the last 2 years have been.
I mean, like that makes absolute sense to me because I think both sides are of course always going to appeal to emotion as best as they can, given the fact that our current political system is structured around upholding capitalism. So even if you're a Democrat or a Republican, as you know, both parties are trying to make sure that the status quo is not appended in any meaningful way. So they have to do something to make themselves seem a little different than the other side. And for the Republican Party, that's racial animus, that's racial agitation at times. And I would say, I mean, Democrats do genuinely have a more protectionist approach to minorities and the LGBT community and whatever, and the disenfranchised, and that's good. And that's good to both rally the base for Democrats, but obviously there's still more white people than not in this country, and the fact that number is getting smaller and smaller is genuinely bringing up a lot of concern of racial displacement within this country, and that is inherently like a white supremacist attitude that has always been prevailing in U.S. political discourse historically. So I was just listening to, for example, I was just listening to the latest like Intercepted podcast with Jeremy Scahill, and he had on these like two professional, like, I mean, he had on these two academics talking about fascism, and they both agreed that like U.S. fascism is very different than the Eurotrash, as one of them called it, like the Eurotrash fascism of Europe. That there are certain elements that even Hitler took from like our kind of racism.
Sure,
so
yeah, like
Trump is just like
the ethnic cleansing of Indians and the Jim Crow era and all that stuff.
Yeah, and we, as much as we try to revise that or whitewash it or brush past it as though those aren't horrific crimes against humanity, those are very real and they were foundational in the United States history. Not saying that like other nations haven't done anything. Turkey certainly is no hero in this conversation.
Canada either.
Oh yeah, well of course Canada as well. But like in the end of the day, like in the end of the day, Donald Trump is using that momentum as perfectly as he could, and it's genuinely working. Like people are fucking losing their minds, man. Finally, someone's saying it. For a lot of people, that's the reality. They're like, this is the fear that they live with every day, that their daughters are going to have sex with a Mexican dude. And that is terrifying for so many people.
Yeah, well, it's funny that you mentioned that exact example, because when I got in a little bit of hot water a couple months back with a little joke I did on Twitter about MS-13 members and my daughter, my fake daughter, I think that was really one of the primary drivers of it. And that's why I think that drove those people so crazy, is because it goes back to this like kind of deep-seated race-based fear that they have of miscegenation and, these brown-skinned people, foreigners coming in to like steal away their wives and daughters. And that's why I touched this nerve with it, that millions of these like MAGA people got so angry about it.
Yeah, I love that. I love the concept of white genocide. Like, I love white genocide. I can go on the record as saying this because, like, it's not systemic cleansing in any meaningful way, but actually just people hanging out with one another and, like, just figuring out that we don't have that many differences, or even if we do have differences, like, we should cherish those and diversify our gene pool, I guess. This is how the white race is no longer pure. This is how the white race is being bred out. And obviously, no other race has this kind of concept. No other race is like, oh my God, the black race is, or the black race is no longer pure. I guess there are specific instances of like black supremacy as well, but obviously it's not any. There's no like systemic prevalence of it, or there aren't any like. It's not necessarily guiding legislation, is what I mean. So. I do genuinely think that this is. I hate the meme of like. Every Democrat saying or every leftist saying like, oh, Republicans are racist, but like it sure seems that way, man. Like it sure really, from where I'm standing, especially today, right? Especially today when compared to like the 1980s, when you look at the Willie Horton ad, like that was something that the campaign ultimately had to turn around and say, like, the Bush campaign had to say, this isn't like we don't like this. We're not condoning this. This is something that we're condemning. This is a super PAC that's totally unrelated to us, despite its success, obviously. But now you have Donald Trump literally tweeting out, our modern day Willie Horton ad from his fucking Twitter and pinning it to the top of his profile for all to see. So
it is really remarkable. And I was reading about this today too. And like you said, like Lee Atwater, who was kind of like the mastermind behind that Willie Horton ad, he on his deathbed was like apologizing and trying to repent for all this. But now this is just like boilerplate Republican orthodoxy. Like this is what their whole party is about.
Even that fucking clown Roger Stone originally said that this is something that will like haunt the Republican Party at the time. But I guess that's his perspective has obviously changed as far as like driving racial animus. But but he's a clown anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Sure. Well, one thing that you said today, actually, that I noticed when you were commenting on this ad is that the left needs something like this. What did you mean by that?
That wasn't even the racist one though. That was referring to the Jobs Not Mobs ad that Trump also posted, which literally looked like a Hollywood trailer, right? But instead of like someone doing cool shit, it's just like a fake CGI body and then Donald Trump's head superimposed on top of it, doing like punching the air with like explosives and whatever. And then amidst all of that, you see like certain numbers and it's so fucking nerdy, but with that music, it makes it really cool where it's like 3.8% GDP growth. And it's like, black unemployment at record lows. And it just looked cool. And then obviously on the other side of it, they showed like the Democrats are trying to kill every single Republican in this country. And it's just like little bits and pieces of, like some random redneck dude getting punched in the face in like Alabama or whatever. And like Antifa, like super cuts of like Antifa protesters. You don't even know who's actually doing what in the super cut, but they're like trying to portray the Democratic Party as this like violent, radical Marxist, which I personally think we should be doing more of. But it was just it portrayed Republican, like it conveyed that message perfectly that Republicans care about jobs and care about fixing the economy. And all Democrats care about is like fighting with their hands and also simultaneously being whiny babies. Like they're both super powerful predators that want to kill all white people, but they're also whiny babies that, have blue hair and cry about bathrooms.
Yeah. And this is the completely fucked thing too, is that they're doing this in the wake of this, both the MAGA bomber and the synagogue shooter who was not a Trump guy because Trump was not racist enough for him.
Well, the Kroger guy too. There was another hate crime that happened. There's another hate crime that happened, and that didn't even get that much media coverage. But like all of these guys are absolutely connected to one another, and their connection is like the Republican infrastructure and how these really hateful ideas, these really violent ideas, have become mainstream.
Well, and they're connected to. Alt-right guys and MAGA guys have been literally murdering people across America and Canada for like 2 years now. It just seems like it's increasing. So the idea that with all this happening, how they're just doubling down on the messaging of democratic mobs and violent leftists, it's crazy to me how brazen it is. But then you see how it will work too, because like the people that are the kind of diehard conservative followers, the people that are really immersed in conservative media, they'll believe it. They'll believe anything that these people tell them.
Well, Rob, it seems to me like you're missing a crucial element here. Ted Cruz wasn't able to have his Cornish hen one night when he was at his fancy, DC establishment. And that to me is almost as bad, if not worse than like widespread far-right extremist terrorism conducted in at least inside of the United States, which contributes to more than 75% of domestic terror incidents in the past decade alone. So I don't know. You tell me, man. What the real hate crime is actually? You know what the real hate speech is? The word billionaire.
Yeah.
Billionaire
Right.
word is now our generation's N word, and those are the people who are actually being really oppressed. After gamers, of course.
Yeah, obviously. I think Stephen Miller one time had to wait like 10 minutes or whatever to get his sushi the other night too. So that was it is coming from both sides. So that's something that we have to be conscious of. But
Yeah.
no, it is really frustrating because even when they hold up examples like Maxine Waters or people that are like kind of, rubbing up against that line more of, we need to confront these people and we need to do that. It's still such a false equivalence because like holding up the people that are in charge of power of the United States government and whose policies like affect people's lives and kill people and suggesting that like it's somehow across some line to yell at them when they're fucking eating their breakfast or whatever. It's ludicrous.
Yeah. And by the way, this pertains to Democrats as well. Like if a Democrat is the one saying like, hold your legislators accountable, what a lot of people fail to recognize is we should be holding Democratic politicians accountable for their decisions as well. If they're expanding our surveillance state, despite being so opposed to Donald Trump, is so offended, why give him more power? Why give him? Why expand the defense budget willingly with bipartisan consensus? These are things that the Democrats do as well that we should absolutely oppose, that we should absolutely criticize them on, including aside from the two things that I mentioned, including like when they don't do enough to and they allow lower court appointees to just go through because they need to focus on midterms, like judge appointments, and also when they don't do enough to protect DACA immigrants. Well, by the way, speaking of Republican mania, one of my favorite things because I deal with trolls all the time on my Twitch, and they always come in and they're like, oh yeah, well, what about this or that? One of the things they always mention is, well, Donald Trump actually personally loved the DACA immigrants and he like put forward a proposition to like protect them, but it was the Democrats. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Like they could literally write any sort of legislation they want to right now. They hold both the House and the Senate and also the White House. What are you talking about? They could literally do that right now. They could tomorrow they could pass legislation that would literally fucking put DACA citizens on a path towards naturalization, which is something that the overwhelming majority of Americans support or supported at least. I don't know where we're at now.
Yeah, and I think this is something also that I got into a little bit last week with my guest Ishmael and Daro, and where it goes back to failures of the Obama administration too, because I went over this last week, but I think it's important to point out that Obama thought he could play ball with these people, and thought that if I deport more illegal immigrants than any other president in history, then the right will see that how serious I am about immigration, and then they'll of course work with me when I make this legislation to protect the really good immigrants that are that have been here, that have lived their whole lives here. Yeah. And they couldn't even do that. And like, to me, that whole administration is really a testament to how this idea of, we need to get things done in America by working with the right. But no, it's not going to work. It will never work. If it was ever going to work, it would have happened during the Obama administration. And it's just not a viable solution moving forward. And it doesn't seem like enough Democrats have really grasped that. And I think that's another thing you mentioned too, is that in terms of Democrats being held accountable, I don't think that happened enough during the Obama administration when he expanded the surveillance state and when he was launching drone wars in Yemen and Pakistan and all these places. The left kind of fell asleep at the wheel a little bit, I think,
I don't necessarily agree with that, Rob. And the reason why I won't agree with that is because like we are at the Young Turks, at least, I started working under the Obama administration. And we were extremely vocal in our criticism of the Obama administration, from immigration to drone strikes, to Obama administration's like treatment of whistleblowers, including Edward Snowden and Chelsea Manning. And we were extremely critical at the time, but mainstream media was not.
Yeah, well, that's really what I mean. I mean, I didn't mean to hold you guys up as an example, because I know it's not like Obama wasn't being criticized from the left anywhere.
Yeah,
and, and that's one.
Now is also doing their best, but in the end of the day, we have like very limited reach. And if you were to say like the CNN and MSNBC were not doing, we're doing virtually nothing to criticize Obama for these like very obvious transgressions. then you'd be correct. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, and just in general, like the level of sustained activism we've seen in the Trump era, not just in the media, but from people getting out into the street. I think that probably could have maybe benefited a few things, but at the same time, maybe I'm talking out of my ass, because there was Occupy Wall Street during the Obama administration. There was Black Lives Matter and Ferguson and all this stuff, and Obama really did what he could to shut these movements down, and also didn't do enough to turn it into like an electoral movement.
Too. That was another one. North Dakota Pipeline.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
and I think, like, Democrats didn't do enough to acknowledge these type of protest movements. And, it's another thing I've talked about before, is that they could have spun these movements into like an electoral constituency, but instead they sided with law enforcement. They sided with the oil companies. They sided with the defense contractors. And that leads America to where it is now, where these fucking ghouls are in charge of absolutely everything, because Democratic activists got beaten down so much during those 8 years.
Yeah. I think that's partially, I don't know. I feel like a big part of that is genuinely because they are also beholden to the same corporate benefactors, or they also benefit from the same status quo that Republicans benefit from. What we are arriving at now is the very real situation that like class needs to be a part of the intersectional conversation. If we are to make any sort of, if we're to bring about any sort of like collective left-wing populism into mainstream political discourse, I think that was and politicians they're not ready to acknowledge that, because again, in the end of the day, voter suppression and decades of or centuries of political inaction and systemic disenfranchisement have made it so that it doesn't necessarily matter what your constituents think. It's a two-party system, and they're going to vote Democrat if they are going to, regardless, because the other side is terrible, and Republicans are going to vote Republican because of like a couple issues that Republicans are very protective on.
Or they're just going to check out of the system entirely and stop voting, which is what
that's what I mean. Yeah,
which is what the majority of people have done, basically.
Yeah, and it's understandable that they feel this way, but I always urge people to go out and vote regardless and participate in electoral politics, because in the end of the day, if we are to ease the burden as best as we can on the more disenfranchised, more marginalized communities that live amongst us, or ease the burden on the proletariat, then we still need to go out and vote, because the difference between the two parties might be marginal at the level of governance, right? Because like Hillary's, a war hawk. She probably would have been fairly to the right of Barack Obama as far as like immigration. You know what I mean? Especially with the current political climate. She's a vicious means tester. So, but that marginal difference at the level of governance would yield drastically different outcomes on the ground, even if it's every single trans person and they're like, and this administration actively trying to eliminate them out of existence, right? Like that's I think 1 to 4% of of the world population. I guess 1 to 4% of the U.S. population. That's a big number, dude. That's a lot of fucking people on the ground that wouldn't necessarily be in a really terrible predicament right now, thinking about leaving certain states where they have absolutely zero constitutional protection once certain protections are repealed at the Supreme Court level.
Yeah, and with abortion as well. I mean, that's something that's going to affect so many people.
Yeah. Abortion,
something that Democrats were reliable. They were reliably kind of keeping those institutions in check. And but yeah, I think I agree with that. I would never tell people not to vote. Like, I think it is important. And I think if you're a leftist, I mean, you can at least look at it like you can pressure Democrats in the way that you can't, pressure these kind of like lizard-brained Republican freaks. But I think what a lot of people are realizing now is that voting isn't nearly enough. It's one aspect of activism that's got to be kind of like a year-round thing. And that's one thing that I think more people have kind of woken up to in the Trump era.
Yeah, I don't know. What do you think the outcomes of these midterm elections are going to be like? I feel like I lean towards Democrats winning the House. I don't know about the Senate. I am excited about a bunch of people. You want to talk about the midterms? That's why, like,
yeah.
Originally.
No, that's why I kind of brought you on, but we were kind of getting into some good stuff.
Again, like I'm no Virgil Texas, but I'll try to give you what my perspective is, even though I don't necessarily focus as much on electoral politics. But like obviously, look, you have guys like you have people like Stacey Abrams, for example. You have Andrew Gillum. Like these are people that I am actually excited for, even though I know for a fact that they are nowhere near where I'm at within my ideology. But ultimately, like they are still, these are still very much to the left of the establishment Democratic Party, right?
Yeah, so sure. Even though Gillum did kind of hedge on a few things that he campaigned on.
Oh no, absolutely. And like I think Gillum is, and I'm not saying this because he's a black dude. I'm saying this as like his policies. Gillum is exactly like Barack Obama in the sense that he is just progressive enough. From an ideological perspective, he's just progressive enough to not be offensive to the same like wealthy constituents, the real rulers, the oligarchs, I guess. Where he will push for he'll fight for 15, which is like insanely popular. He will fight for Medicare for all, again, insanely popular, polling at I believe 72%. Even 52% of the Republican Party is in favor of Medicare for all. So like he's pushing for very popular positions, but just a little further to the left in the center, where the center is right now. Yeah, but it's still important, especially because these are red states that they're in, like reliably red states, as a matter of fact. So that will destroy. And another guy that I'm incredibly excited for, of course, is God damn it, holy shit, I call him the anti-John Ossoff, Ojeda.
Oh, Ojeda, yeah.
No, yeah, Ojeda. He is like the exact opposite of Ossoff, as far as like he's in I think a plus 50 Trump district, and he's beating at the latest poll results I was looking at. He's beating Carol Miller, who's like a billionaire Republican, in a plus 50 district. That is incredible.
Well, yeah, I think Ojeda is really the blueprint of what a red state Democrat should be, not fucking Joe Manchin.
Or not John Ossoff. That's why I was John Ossoff, because like John Ossoff is like is the epitome of a lanyard wearing, I'm going to hold Trump accountable. I'll say, how dare you, sir, when it's necessary kind of Democrat. And it totally didn't work, despite the overwhelming support that he got from Democrats across the country. You need a guy who lives, breathes, and shits West Virginia like John Ossoff. Okay, not John Ossoff. Sorry, than Ojeda. And I think people can even go further to the left than Ojeda on a lot of issues. Obviously, he's still like very pro police officers. He's very much in support of. I mean, he's a military veteran, and he talks about that frequently. I don't know if his perspective has changed on it. I was actually going to interview him soon, hopefully, and ask him about that, because like he definitely still has a lot of like nationalist leaning tendencies, but he is extremely pro union, pro legalization of marijuana, pro LGBT. Like this is the guy. Like he's a tough dude. This is the kind of identity politics that people on the left should be doing in red states. And if he wins, that's the blueprint, 100%.
Yeah. And I think I'm inclined to agree with you about the sort of midterm forecast. With Democrats will probably take the House. I know it's like people are right to be kind of nervous about it, and they should be, considering what happened in 2016. But I mean, just to me, just kind of the eyeball test has been, in any kind of special election over the last 2 years, there does seem to me to be a big enthusiasm gap. And like even when races that Democrats have lost, they've made up huge ground in these like reliably Republican Trump districts that Trump won by a lot.
The only difference, and this is a very significant one, Donald Trump is unlike any other candidate, right? He's dropped all pretext or all pretense that he is he's America's leader. He's absolutely his base's leader. He's absolutely a Republican Party's leader, and he's campaigning. Not dissimilar to other authoritarians in other countries, similar to Erdogan, for example, when I saw this as well. He's campaigning specifically in districts that Republicans need to secure the vote on. And I don't think that like previous presidents has ever done anything at this level. You know what I mean? Like this passionately.
And you know what? I honestly think this is something that Democrats should be doing. I mean, this is
100%.
In a way, this is what Obama should have been doing the entire time around the midterms.
100%. And also, like, Republicans are always going to do this forever. But more damaging than anything else is the reality that the kind of messaging that they're using is really terrifying. I mean, this white nationalist rhetoric. I mean, Donald Trump coming out and to a crowd of thousands of people screaming about how he's a nationalist, screaming about how like these, rape caravans are coming in and how he's going to send 15,000 troops to the border, even though these people are like 800 miles away. Like, what an idiotic flex. Like, it's just such a weird flex. It's the total weird flex, but okay moment for Donald Trump. But it's working. I think I think it could potentially work. We'll see the outcomes, but
and it's ridiculous because this is what it's like. He's going back to what's worked from him from day one, from the moment that he launched his campaign with the rapist Mexicans. This is what Trumpism is all about. It's not about low taxes. It's not about states' rights or any of this bullshit. It's about brown and black people are coming to take away what's yours. They're coming to take away your wives and daughters. They're gonna I saw a clip from some fucking boomer lady in Minnesota, and she's like, MS-13 are gonna come and take our vacation homes from the lake and stuff like that. I'm like, it's crazy. Like, this is really what Trump's base believes. And he recognizes that, to his credit, I guess, even though it's fucking terrifying and awful, but he recognizes exactly what animates them, and he just keeps throwing them red meat. And if he was out there trying to campaign on, I did this tax cut, and Republicans would just get wiped out.
Mitt Romney did exactly that, right? Mitt Romney did exactly that, and they did get wiped out. I mean, it was Mitt Romney couldn't even beat a black dude in this country. I mean, think about that. That's something that says something to me, at least. I don't know.
And it was Obama's base was completely demoralized at that point too. Like, that was a really good opportunity for Republicans to jump on it. But I guess what we've seen is that they weren't willing to go whole hog into like the worst, basest animating fears of what drives their voters. And that's what Trump has done from minute one, and that's what he's doing right now. And if Republicans do manage to keep the House and keep the Senate, it's going to be 100% because of that, and not because of anything they've actually accomplished legislatively.
Oh, are you telling me that the tax cuts that will ultimately end up hurting the middle class is not the leading motivator for the Republican base? Like, they don't care about it as much. Dude, it's all animosity. It's all team sport. All they give a shit about is owning the libs, dude. Like, a lot of them just care about owning the libs. The rich ones obviously care about the tax cuts and deregulation and whatnot. But the majority of the poor Republicans that vote against their self-interest or vote against their best interest are voting exclusively out of spite. The fact that they've had this economic anxiety festering within them for decades, the fact that they're worse off than their parents were, the fact that they will never achieve the American dream, and at least one side, the Republican side, is actively pointing the finger at brown people coming into this country, or America browning out, and lying about it all the time, calling illegal immigrants criminals when it absolutely statistically is a false statement, when they commit crimes at way lower rates than natural-born U.S. citizens do, both documented and undocumented. Or they say that they are, taking advantage of our robust social state, like Ann Coulter did on our debate at the Fox affiliate, which is laughable. That's a laughable idea. But it's also false. They're not. They're just doing whatever they can, and these people don't care about facts at all. They just care about tribalism, I guess. And or their inappropriate understanding, or their like super narrow way of approaching tribalism. They can't see it as like these people are all, these people are just American citizens. Like the way Donald Trump's language has shifted into vilifying now natural born U.S. citizens that are children of like undocumented immigrants. That is terrifying. Yeah, and I don't know why obviously I'm in a different situation because I am an anchor baby myself. So when I hear that, I knew that this was coming anyway. Like, I've been warning about this for a while, but like people need to realize, like, no, this is like American fascism, and it's happening.
Yeah, and that's why people can't say, oh yeah, sure, they're building concentration camps, but they're just for the immigrants, or they're just for the immigrant children, because that's going to expand really quickly. The definition of what an illegal immigrant is will expand. And, if these people are allowed to continue to consolidate power, eventually that's going to expand to political dissidents too. And you see all Republicans all the time online. They love free speech, and they're obsessed with free speech, and everyone just has to have free speech, and we have to respect that. But they'll back off that really quick when it comes to like leftists, when they'll say, oh no, it's not free speech, when they're being, it's sedition and treason and stuff like that. And that's why it's such a slippery slope. And that definition of who qualifies to be an American, if these people are allowed to maintain power, is just going to continue shrinking. And that's why it is really scary. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's not a real problem. And that's what happens when it's a red herring. You constantly need to squeeze out, you need to tighten that vice grip on immigration, right? On like on the problems that immigrants are creating in this country, when at the most basic level, and this is a correlation and not necessarily a causal effect, but at the most basic level, if you look at immigration numbers since 1980s in comparison to how crime has dropped since the 1980s, like immigrants obviously aren't causing additional crime in this country. You know what I mean? But no, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to people because their personal feelings are that, and I think Hazleton is a perfect example of this in Pennsylvania. Their personal feelings, despite the economic benefits that the net benefit that immigrants have caused in areas like Hazleton that were at the brink of insolvency by bringing in industry and like younger laborers and shops and whatnot into breathing life into like specific places all around America, doesn't matter, because in the end of the day, that's a brown person. Okay. And I don't want to be around a brown person. That's literally it.
Yeah. And, okay, so you mentioned the kind of like how the very real economic anxiety that people are experiencing is contributing to making these problems worse. And it's one of the things that I noticed a couple months ago. You mentioned the Intercepted podcast, and Tucker Carlson appeared on the Intercepted podcast with Glenn Greenwald.
Oh, now, I really didn't know that.
Yeah. And I like Glenn Greenwald. I don't always agree with him 100% of the time. And I think his association with Tucker Carlson is kind of like troubling. And I think during this interview, he kind of let Carlson get away with a lot of stuff without pushing him on it. But that was one of the things that he pointed out.
I think Cenk did that too, by the way, with their debate at Politicon.
Yeah. And so one of the things that Tucker pointed out was that, you have these American cities that have just been hollowed out and all the jobs have gone away. And, the industry has moved away. It's moved to China, or it's moved to Brazil or Bangladesh or whatever. And then you have all these immigrants flooding in. But he's kind of like implying that those two things are connected, where it's not the fucking immigrants that are pushing American corporations to build factories in South America and Southeast Asia and China. And
I can't speak specifically to that Tucker Carlson interview, but I do think that he's absolutely correct if he pointed out like Bangladeshi immigration or like a looming migrant crisis. But the looming migrant crisis is a consequence of global capitalism, and it's absolutely a consequence of global capitalism's devastation on our global climate, like the exacerbation of climate change, essentially. Like even the Honduran caravan, right? Like. Yeah. Part of the reason why these caravans have been around for a very long time is, of course, like violence and poverty. But another reason why these caravans have always existed and are like constantly coming to Mexico and the United States is because of drought caused by climate change. The exacerbation of tensions in Syria, like and the Syrian civil war. Obviously, there's different dynamics at play there, but climate change and drought and the destruction of crops and agricultural production in these countries is absolutely absolutely creating an environment ripe for volatility, absolutely creating an environment where there's going to be a lot of global conflict and also migration on top of that, like mass migration. And that will eventually become a crisis. It's not at this point. The amount of people coming into the United States is absolutely not a problem. We could totally have open borders in my mind. But it will, especially for like Europe and whatnot, or especially like India, for example, when you have like 4 million people coming in from Bangladesh, that's going to be a serious problem, both culturally and also economically.
Yeah, and this is something that I talk about all the time on the show, and it's something I'm a little bit obsessed with because, you know, these things that we're starting to see play out now are only going to become so much more intense over the next 10, 20 years or so in terms of like climate refugees and stuff like that. But you mentioned that Honduran caravan, and another thing, like it isn't just climate change that's motivating these mass migrations, but like America has been meddling in the politics in South America and Central America for decades now. There was a coup in Honduras that was rubber stamped by the United States State Department.
No, absolutely. Anytime like a brown country tries to democratically implement any sort of socialist principles or nationalize like an extraction industry or whatever, the United States immediately is like triggered by it and has to fucking do everything in their power to impose sanctions or implement coups in their, inside of these countries, absolutely devastating the socio-political climate there and destroying infrastructure as a whole. I mean, ruining these countries, crippling them. We are absolutely responsible for it. But again, imperialism and the devastation that we cause on the climate are both consequences of unfettered capitalism. And what we're seeing in places like Brazil, and even places like, I would say, even in places like Italy, for example, or other countries that have proto-fascist dictatorships now, or like strongmen, authoritarian strongmen in positions of power, like Turkey or like Russia. This is like this isolationist, like fascist exhaustion of capitalism. There's only two ways out of this. Either we completely reform this system, this economic structure that we're living under that is inherently oppressive, or we continue with it, and we have fascist dictatorships, and the poor are as oppressed as possible. They're left fighting amongst themselves with their little scraps as the wealthy keep hoarding more and more of the wealth and the resources. And and resources will become more scarce with climate change and extreme weather conditions becoming like our reality. And that's what it seems like. That's the direction it seems like we're heading in. Yeah, and it's really, really fucking terrifying, I think. And it's terrifying for me, and I'm a white guy in like I'm geographically like in one of the I feel like one of the best places to potentially weather the storm as much as possible. And it's terrifying for me. So I try to I can't even imagine what it's like for people, for Americans in marginalized communities and for people in the global South and people. It's going to be really ugly in the next 10, 20 years unless we're able to kind of figure things out in America. And I mean, this is why I'm kind of obsessed with America, because this is kind of like where it's all coming from. No, I know.
In terms of
Canadians love America, dude. I mean, sometimes it's like I said, sometimes a net benefit, like in your case, but in most instances, like I feel like a lot of Canadians are either like very nice socialists or like really attractive fascists.
Yeah. Well, no, but the thing, Canada's got its own problems, right? We've got plenty of racism here. We've got plenty of reactionaries. We've got a lot of like complacent people that are not really involved in the political process because we're not as bad as America. But yeah, I feel like institutionally we're still capable of creating a government that can work for people, but it's all pointless unless there's major reform in America. And that's one of the reasons I follow it so closely. And I guess, yeah, that's the kind of like interesting and exciting and scary thing about this time, is that we all kind of agree on the left that these major institutional changes are necessary. I think everyone realizes now that, like we were talking about, voting is a big aspect of that, but it's not all of it. We're not like, Americans are not going to vote their way out of this problem. Institutionally, the country is just basically fucked. Especially with the Trump administration now stocking the entire court system with these like Federalist Society zombies, who are going to, shut down any hope of a progressive legislation. And
the most conservative court. It's for generations to come. Yeah, I don't know. I see creeping fascism. Like, I see all of the telltale signs, and we've been talking about it for a while, and people were like, oh, dude, you're such a silly, crazy leftist. Like, you think everyone's a fascist. Oh, yeah, sure, Donald Trump's a Nazi. At this point, and I've said this so many times, at this point, if Donald Trump literally had a swastika tattoo, people would be like, dude, Hitler didn't have a swastika tattoo. You don't need a swastika tattoo to be considered a Nazi. I mean, he's just, maybe it's the Indian version. Like, you don't know that. I mean, yeah, sure, he might be Sig Heiling, or maybe he was just saying hi. I mean, it could be either thing.
Another thing too that differentiates the fascists of 2018 from previous variations we've seen is Israel. And like we saw this, I don't know if you saw that Steve King press conference.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw that Steve King press conference, but he's like, how can I be a white supremacist? I love Israel. And
I love
Bolsonaro also is saying, I love Israel. So how can I be?
I love this other supremacist, this other supremacist apartheid state that is incredibly violent to our common enemy, which is brown Muslims. How can I be anti-Semitic when I love like a state that essentially was, a state run by a state leader who fucking went and met up with like Viktor Orban among other really horrible fascist and anti-Semitic people. They love it. They love Israel.
Yeah, well, that's it. It gives them kind of a convenient talking point to talk about why they're not actually white supremacists. And also, if you get into the kind of fundamentalist Christian types, they not only do they want Jews to leave America, but they want Jews to go back to Israel in order for the apocalypse to start. And that's part of their whole biblical prophecy that they believe in.
Oh yeah, of course. That's another part. Yeah. For evangelicals, you're absolutely correct.
Yeah. That's kind of an interesting wrinkle, because that's kind of the go-to excuse for whenever people are being accused of fascism in 2018. But as you said, it's they admire the kind of racist ethno-state that Israel is, because that's the kind of country that they want to live in. But it's also a convenient place that they just want all the Jews to go to so they don't have to live around them anymore.
Yeah, no, it's a double whammy, 100%.
Okay, but so where is this all going to go, though? I feel like we all kind of come to an agreement that these major changes are needed, major systemic changes, and that with the coming kind of looming climate crisis, we don't really have 40 years to organize and vote these people out, and we're kind of getting to the point where we're going to need all the cards are being laid on the table, and we're going to need to kind of figure things out more quickly. But so where do you think this is going to go? I don't want to, we don't need to. I don't want to get you in trouble or anything like that, but what? No, how's this going to play out for America?
Or I think, look, human beings have always been violent. Violence has always been a massively important part of any sort of movement or any sort of revolution. It's a consequence in most instances, but either I do genuinely foresee violence in our future. Either way, either it's the proletariat rising in some way. Obviously, I don't condone that. I'm against that. I think the things that I'm trying to advocate for are at the very least, using democratic means, trying to push for a revolution using the democratic protocol set in place. But either it's going to be like a people's revolution style thing, or it's going to turn into an extremely violent fascist dictatorship where we have we're slowly eroding the non-white part of the population, which, by the way, the concept of whiteness will also obviously expand, so it doesn't matter. Whoever is the other side, and poor people will essentially erode inside of this these feudalist or neo-feudalist fascist states all around the world, backed by multinational corporations. Canada is what is it? The CDC said, or CBC said something when they were Bolsonaro might be a fascist, but it yields a lot of opportunity for Canadian businesses.
You can invest in those Brazilian
nationals are going to take is that, it's sick that we're fucking destroying the last rainforest on the planet.
Yeah, get in on those Brazilian logging company stocks though, and then you're going to make a killing.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It doesn't matter.
No, and that's the thing that concerns me too, is that when all the cards are on the table, I feel like corporate media and the people that are kind of entrenched in that upper class, the top 1% or whatever, they'll always side with the brutal fascists versus even like a mild social democracy that's going to try and redistribute anything.
Fucking look at Bernie Sanders. Look at the way Bernie Sanders is still treated, even though he's the most popular politician in the United States. Like Jake Tapper, like has an aneurysm trying to disprove Bernie Sanders' claims that the fucking Mercatus study found. You know what I mean?
No, that was great.
Anytime anyone is like slightly left of center, these guys absolutely show their true colors. And I'm not saying every single person's like that. I guess Chris Hayes is like nice. I like him, but you know,
but I think
majority of these people in positions of power inside of media are also still very much interested in upholding the status quo rather than appending it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I like Chris Hayes too, but I think if it comes down to like a hard right Republican or a social democrat or a socialist, whatever these guys' personal feelings are, that's the way that they're going to be pushed. And if they don't agree with that direction, then they're not going to have the same platform. But I guess that's a good place to leave it. I mean, we've been going for a little while here. So I think we probably are in the agreement that with this coming midterm, Democrats will probably retake the House, and provided everyone does get out there and vote. It seems like the Senate is just like a mathematical improbability at this point, just because it's become so undemocratic and gerrymandered, which is kind of another problem in and of itself. But what's your far off 2020 pick? Like, are you going to be are you a Bernie guy or what do you think?
I mean, I don't see any other realistic popular candidate. But my hope is Bernie, sure. Because there's anyone else I can think of outside of Bernie Sanders that is at least even like, put their name in the hat. But I think what's going to happen is like a Joe Biden style candidate put forward by the Democratic Party. And then there's a lot of new presidential hopefuls that are kind of making a name for themselves. Like you hear like Cory Booker. Every instance where there's like cameras present, you'll hear Cory Booker make like these launch these platitudes that seem really good and get clicks on Now This News or whatever. So he's probably going to be another one. Kirsten Gillibrand, I thought was also going to be a Democratic presidential hopeful, but because of the Al Franken stuff and because how inherently awful the Democratic Party infrastructure is, they kind of are punishing her for speaking out against it, speaking out against Al Franken. But, you have Kamala Harris. You're going to see a more diverse group of people who would still very much be interested in upholding the same kind of like oppressive structure that we have, and then Bernie on the other side, and you'll see the same kind of demonization, the same kind of vilification of Bernie Sanders. He's not a Democrat. Look, he doesn't like, all that same bullshit. The Susan Sarandon Bernie saga will probably continue, and will put up like an ineffective candidate in the end of the day, and even more progressives will feel hopeless as a consequence of that, because after 2 years of like fighting side by side against Donald Trump and fascism in general, Democrats will probably still turn around and fuck us over. And, of course, Donald Trump will win again. 100%. Donald Trump is incredibly successful as a Republican, and he's incredibly popular within the Republican Party. And the more racist he gets, the more successful he will be. So that's where we're heading towards.
Yeah. Well, first of all, this is a hashtag still with her podcast. So little
apologies for offending everyone with my toxic masculinity and inherent like anti-women speech.
Yeah. No, that's not true. But yeah, I think when you get into talking about Bernie 2020, you get kind of this like weird thing where people think you're saying that he's like a perfect leftist or like and he's not. He fucks up. I would like for someone to much further left than Bernie. But I think what the sort of 2016 campaign showed me, and particularly the primary, was that really a lot of it is just simply about name recognition, and he didn't have that in 2016. And
he
has
certainly
it now.
has it now. Yeah, you're right. Well, all
he's,
campaigns are name recognition. I do wholeheartedly believe that.
Yeah, and he's not the perfect leftist, but he's the furthest left of any Democratic candidate in that field. So
yeah, in the age range at least, or at least like has like experience, like governance experience.
Yeah, and so what I'm hoping happens is that he's, I think you're right that it's not just going to be, 2 or 3 people. It's going to be a diverse field, Democratic primary, which I think will be good. And hopefully he'll be able to pick up that progressive vote, and the sort of like more centrist types will kind of cancel each other out.
I don't think so. I think the Democratic infrastructure will absolutely keep whatever their best candidate is going to be in a position of power, especially in the primaries, as they did with Hillary Clinton. And the Democratic infrastructure extends to mainstream media as well. I do genuinely think that they will probably try the same kind of tricks that they did originally against Bernie Sanders, and they will probably be successful because Bernie Sanders has a lot of issues when it comes to campaigning. He didn't have name recognition, sure, and it was like a constant uphill battle, constant struggle. But in the end of the day, like demographics does play a part in this, and he was not appealing to the most important constituency or the most important voting block of all for the Democrats, which is black people in the South. And if you can't overcome that hurdle, and if you can't actually, speak to black people rather than at black people, which Bernie Sanders, I don't even think did that. I think he did a good job overall, but it's just like the infrastructure is too powerful. You have all of the Baptist churches that you can immediately go to. You know what I mean? Like, you can literally bus voters to go vote for your candidate in the primaries. This sort of stuff.
It's gonna be quite
it's a hurdle. It's a big hurdle to overcome.
Yeah, and it's gonna be quite a fight, isn't it? I mean, the 2016 primary was pretty ugly. Still a lot of lingering wounds from that, and probably the 2020 primary will be 1,000 times worse. Which I don't even know how that's possible, but it's gonna happen. No, but I think you're right. He didn't do a good enough job talking to those African American communities. I think he has learned something from that, and I think that will be definitely a focal point. But I know, I'm trying to be optimistic about it. I think you're kind of taking the more cynical route, which is probably the more accurate result.
Yeah, no, I've been beaten senseless at this point. That's why.
Yeah, well, that's pretty fucking understandable.
Yeah, sorry to bum everyone out. I apologize.
It's okay. It's that's what this podcast is about, exploring the hellish nightmare world of modern reality together. So you're helping me do that.
All right.
So I guess, this has been a really interesting talk, Hasan. I always appreciate chatting with you about this stuff. I think we covered everything I wanted to talk about. Before we get going, do you want to just plug your stuff, talk about where people can find you?
So I have a sizable Facebook page. You can just search my name and it'll come up, Hasan Piker, HasanPiker. I'm also on YouTube. I'm also on Instagram at Hasan D. Piker, on Twitter at Hasan the Hun, and I'm live every single day at Twitch at twitch.tv/HasanAbi. That's twitch.tv/HasanAbi. Rob has also been on the show, and I usually clip out some of the stuff and put it on my YouTube page as well. So, check me out on any of those places.
Great. Well, once again, thank you so much for taking the time to come on and talk to me about this stuff. It was really, really good stuff.
Well, thank you for having me, man.
Yeah, well, we'll do it again sometime. And that's it, Hasan. Take care, man. I'll talk to you later.
All right, peace, dude.
So that was Hasan Piker. That was really great stuff. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Hasan. Hasan's such a cool guy. And, maybe some of his coolness will rub off on me here. And I can only hope, anyways. I'm not very cool. I'm old now, so I'm not cool. And so that's a little sad, but it's okay. It's fine. I'm fine with it. So thanks again, Hasan. So that is the end of the show. That was a pretty long conversation with Hasan. So I'm going to end the show now. If it's your first time listening and you liked what you heard and you'd like to contribute to the show financially, I would really appreciate it. And if you'd like to do that, you can go to patreon.com/49th Parahell and contribute a few dollars a month there. We've got a Discord server. I've got a bunch of ideas about bonus content and things like that. So please consider heading over to Patreon and pitching in there if you can. And I thank you in advance. But once again, if you do want to get in touch with me, you can find me on Twitter at Rob Rousseau. You can find the show on Twitter at 49th Parahell. You can write me an email at 49thparahell@gmail.com. And please, I don't get enough emails. If you want to write me something and have me read it on the show or talk about it on the show, please send me an email, and I'd love to hear from you. So that's going to be it for me for today, and thank you very much for listening. So this is Rob Rousseau signing off. Take care. Bye.